Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Do you know someone with Alzheimer's disease? The T2 Protect AD is a national research study testing whether an investigational drug can protect against slow or improve memory and thinking problems in people with Alzheimer's. So it's a very interesting thing that this should happen, of course, because there isn't a family that isn't being touched with Alzheimer's disease. And I was very privileged to know Dr. Mark Brody for many, many years. And here he is in Delray Beach, and he's really an international star when it comes to this. You know, Dr. Brody, when you started talking about Alzheimer's disease, and I know that you're a neurologist, are you not?
Oh, yeah, I still am.
Okay, but you concentrated on Alzheimer's disease, and why is that?
Well, I'm a stroke neurocritical care neurologist, and that's what I did for 17 years. And then things changed where we did acute intra-arterial intervention. And then as a stroke guy, I saw a lot of vascular dementia, and then I really started honing in on Alzheimer's, and then my dad got the disease, and things became much more intense from my point of view.
Of course, and important. I can understand that. Well, so are you, in your clinical studies, and this is a big pharmaceutical company that you're working with, I see, mm-hmm. I know that you really want the Nobel Prize, don't you? You want to be the one that figures out what that special thing, like Dr. Salk did, to get rid of Alzheimer's. Do you not?
Oh yeah, but I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna be in the running for a Nobel Prize. So the companies that come up with the compounds and then go to test them to present to the FDA to see if they've got something that's safe and effective. Somebody who actually came up with the original compound, they're in the running for a Nobel Prize. I'm just really a sophisticated worker bee.
That's putting it mildly for you, because I know how many people you've helped. It must be very painful for you to see all the Alzheimer's. Had you ever envisioned it would have taken over the world as it has?
I was hopeful that we would have had something that was really going to be impactful by now. And so, you always have that hope. But I've seen things grow, and we're in ground zero in Palm Beach County and in South Florida in general, because we just have so many people with the disease. So it's just all around us. And so I think we have a different perspective than, let's say, if you were in the Midwest. We just have, in Palm Beach County, 52% of the people are over age 65. And age is obviously the biggest risk factor.
Yes, so that's true, and that's why it does make us the capital, unfortunately, of this terrible disease. Now, you wrote a book called Brain Matters, which is a perfect name, of course, and it's really for the prevention of Alzheimer's, aging, and stroke. So how are we going to prevent it?
Well, we've come a long way on prevention. In fact, I'm up here now doing a study about people who have diabetes and Alzheimer's, because that's a significant risk factor. But really, there are similar risk factors to stroke, which is how I got interested in about prevention. So the risk factors, you can't change the risk factor of age, but diabetes, high, which is, of course, poorly controlled, is worse. Hypertension, high cholesterol, history of trauma, then, things that are, somewhat out of control. But if you've had a history of stroke or coronary artery disease, or anything that involves the vascular system, these are pre-existing risk factors. Now, we also know that the Mediterranean diet is protective. We know that exercise, both aerobic exercise and weight exercises, are protective, and we really know that when you exercise, especially aerobic exercise, you increase the brain-derived nerve growth factor because we still make new brain cells even as we age, and you can speed up that process. And so we came up with a prevention program. And then, of course, there's being socially interactive, learning new things. We've got a lot of information about prevention now, but we know we have to institute those earlier. So really the ages to really institute prevention protocols are between 40 and 65 before people get the clinical disease, because these abnormal proteins, the amyloid and tau, are building up at least 10 to 15 years before anybody gets a symptom.
That's very interesting. So when you say that to a younger person, they probably look at you and they can't believe what you're saying. That's not a known. I haven't read that anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, in our literature, in our world, it's well known. And part of the problem that we've had as far as being able to make a dent is that the disease has a lot of momentum by the time people have symptoms, and there's already been a lot of synaptic connection losses in the brain by the time people have symptoms.
Well, I was just thinking about the organization that you're working with, the T2 Protect AD, and it's a national research study. So you do a lot of this research, don't you?
Right, and we, in fact, I'm up in Stewart because we have a second center. We have our main big center, 11,000 square feet in Delray, and we have another center up in Stewart in the Kane Center, which is a big aging facility. So, yeah, we're busy. We have, depending on where we are in the cycle of studies, we have from 10 to 25 trials going.
My goodness. I mean, do you ever sleep?
Oh, yeah. Well, luckily, we have a lot more people than probably when we were talking in the old days. So that helps. But, this last year when we had yet another big study, Biogen was a negative study, there was a lull. And so these kinds of studies like Biohaven, which is the name of the company for this study, and the founder is somebody I know from being involved in Bristol Myers, and the national principal investigator, somebody in San Diego who I've been on a number of boards with. The idea is this, essentially, is that there's a drug that's used in glutamate metabolism, which is part of what happens when brain cells start to die, and that's been used for Lou Gehrig's disease, for ALS, that has some benefit. And the idea would be if we can tweak that, in which they did, they altered a little bit. It's more GI, has less GI side effects, and maybe somewhat more potent. So we know the safety of the drug's been out there. Is that if we had not, if we're trying it on a more slowly progressive disease rather than ALS, which from the time of diagnosis most people are dead in a couple of years, then we may actually have much more impact. It's hard to slow down a freight train, but if things are gaining momentum and the disease is more slowly progressive, we may be able to make a real dent, and that's kind of the thinking behind this study. So we're excited about this study.
So if someone comes to you and you have different studies, who would you put in the T2 Protect AD? How do you decide?
Well, this study's for more moderate patients. People are a little further along. And we don't get that many trials this way, but we're thinking if people are, as the disease gets worse, it gets worse faster. So when you hit kind of the mild to moderate, bordering on moderate, the disease progresses much faster. So if you can show that whatever new drug you're giving people is making a difference, so we can see the difference in those curves of people who are getting the real drug and people who are on placebo, it's easier to prove your case. You don't have to go as long as if you were trying to use a drug for a more mild disease.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So let's just move on. What if someone comes to you with full-blown Alzheimer's? Are you able to do anything with them? To these research studies, it says it looks like it's really can protect against slower, improved memory and thinking, but this wouldn't be what you would prescribe for them, would it?
Well, there's still investigational trials, under the umbrella of the FDA. So it's nothing I can prescribe. You come in, if you fit the criteria, you meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and you have a study partner, then, we put you in the trial, and they're all double-blind trials, as all drugs are that go through the FDA, and that's the only way to get a drug approved in the U.S. To begin with, they're double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. So in English, it means to begin with, I don't know what I'm giving the person, and they don't know what they're getting. As the study gets further along, then there are open-label extensions. That means after that period where you may or may not get the real thing, then everybody gets the real thing. We're not quite there yet with this study, but it's a very interesting trial, and the safety is well known. And I personally know the people involved, and they're really leaders in the field. So we're, the mechanisms that we've tried before, where we try to target amyloid, has not worked out, unfortunately, after $22 billion in 14 years.
Really?
Now, the anti-tau studies, the jury's still out. But now we're looking at what other mechanisms, what other targets can we come up with. And so this is an important trial.
Thank you. That really does explain a lot that people don't understand. Let's just talk a little bit about your stroke. I always call them victors.
Yeah.
So I know someone who just adores you, Sandy Simon, who was a friend of mine also, and you have helped him so much. So how do you separate the two? As a person who has a stroke, are they also going to get Alzheimer's?
If you have a stroke, you're at higher risk for getting Alzheimer's, significantly higher risk. It also depends on where the stroke was and how big it was. But even in Alzheimer's, we see these small little pinpoint strokes. So there's nothing that's pure kind of garden variety Alzheimer's. There are some vascular changes in Alzheimer's, and we're trying to address those as well, and that's why those risk factors of high blood pressure and smoking and high cholesterol and diabetes are important to modify.
Yes, well, we hear so much about it now, and we hear about exercise and all these wonderful attributes that people are told, and they don't always agree, but they certainly, it's there now. And when you first started this, I know when I knew you were really on the cutting edge of something that was very important and very big, and here you are now. And you said, I think, that there are so many studies going on.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lull because the number of studies have gone down, and as a field, we've kind of got the blues, but we're taking a big breath, and we're putting one foot in front of the other, and now momentum is building for let's think outside the box. What other ways can we attack this disease? So that's what's happening. So it's almost like a storm's come through, like a hurricane, and all the deadwood's gone, and now we're starting afresh. This is one of those studies.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, my guest is Dr. Mark Brody, and he, of course, is Brain Matters Research. He's located in Delray Beach. And let me ask you, so if someone comes in and you do put them on the T2 Protect AD, what does that involve? Do they have to come often, or tell us so then people want to call and want to be involved? Sometimes they're a little bit nervous. So would you explain what happens?
Sure. So we do free screenings on a regular basis. People come in, they may have a diagnosis, or they've got memory problems and they're not sure what it is. Then we sit down and discuss it with them, and hopefully they bring in a caregiver or study partner, and we try to figure out what's going on. A lot of people come in and they've already got a diagnosis, and then we say, well, here's this particular study, here's what's involved. In this study, it's a pill study. We don't have to do a lot of imaging like MRIs or CT scans. It's really doesn't have a lot of hoops to jump through. And then once you're in the study, we only need to see people every 10 to 12 weeks, a little more often in the beginning. Now, this is a phase 2 study. We're still proving that we know that it's relatively safe. We need to prove that it's actually effective, so we're looking for that signal. And, the good thing about clinical research is there's no cost. So, and if you're on a medication like an Aricept or a Namenda or Exelon pill or a patch, you stay on that. So you don't go off that so that you get a chance at potentially a new breakthrough drug.
Oh, so you stay on that and you also go into this?
Correct.
That's interesting. Before I forget, I want everyone to know Brain Matters Research, the number to call there if you're interested, and I certainly hope you should call them, 561-381-9060. 561-361-9060. Is that correct?
Yeah, that will be our person who'll set up appointments and ask them just get some basic information.
Okay, so that's really important because that way it saves people, if they're not exactly the one that can participate. But this is it's really wonderful that you are a local researcher because this is a national study, and it's people.
And we're also we may be doing this study in Stewart in the next little while as well.
Well, that's good because we do have people who listen to the show and are located. So normally it's one area, isn't it? But now you've been able to move it a little bit further north.
Well, we have another research site here in Stewart.
I see, and I think you said that's where you were this time that you're.
Yeah, I'm up here today.
Well, you're a busy guy, I have to tell you this, and I think you absolutely love what you're doing. You don't love the problem, but you love dealing with people and trying to help them to see some sort of relief. And have you seen that with your studies?
We've had studies where people have done very well. Most of those studies ended up being negative studies. As a group, the whole group of patients that were in the studies, it wasn't effective enough. But that doesn't mean there aren't a number of people in those studies that have had benefit, just not enough totally in the total group to get approved by the FDA. So we've had people in a number of studies that, in some of the studies, they've been in the study for 6 years, and they really haven't changed. It's just we haven't found as a total group that they've been effective enough. So that's been disheartening, but we'll find something. It took me 17 years to find the breakthrough in stroke. Right. Of course, I'm getting older now. So
right. You don't look older. You look like you're doing really well.
No, trust me, I'm getting older.
Oh, you're getting older. Okay, aren't we all?
Yeah.
I do have a question about something, though, to deal with the, and I know it's a name, it's T2 Protect, but what actually is the drug called?
Yeah, it's let me get.
I can't pronounce it. It's TRORIHUZOLE.
Yeah, it's basically a drug. It's the same drug that we give to people with Lou Gehrig's disease. And let me read this out for you. I don't have it right here.
But I do read. Well, I have this, and it says high glutamate levels.
Yeah.
What is glutamate?
Glutamate is actually a amino acid, and it's it's a neurotransmitter, and it's excitatory, which means when there's any injury to the brain, glutamate gets released, and when it's released, it's like you're pouring gasoline on the fire. So it actually makes the injury accelerate. So what you want to do is block that release or block that glutamate fitting into a receptor that causes the whole. It's almost like a chocolate fountain of inflammation and cell death. So the same thing happens in Lou Gehrig's disease. So what we're trying to do is block what we call neurodegeneration, neuroapoptosis, which is the sequence that brain cells go through when they have an injury and they start to die.
I see. That's so complex. I just want to talk a little bit about the Brain Matters research. It's one of more than 40 sites in the U.S. participating in the T2 Protect AD study, AD meaning Alzheimer's disease. The study's sponsored by New Haven-based, it's Biohaven Pharmaceutical Holding Company Limited, and is coordinated by the Alzheimer's Disease Cooperative Study. It's a large clinical research consortium based at the University of California in San Diego.
Right.
I mean, people don't really understand how many places and facilities and physicians are working on this. Do you ever have a major conference of everyone getting together?
No, we just had one. So twice a year we have two major conferences, international conferences. We just had the Alzheimer's Association International Conference in Los Angeles in mid-July. And so 2 out of 3 times it's in North America, 1 out of 3 it's in Europe. And then we have the clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease also once a year, and that will be in December. So in those meetings, international, there'll be 4,000 to 5,000 people there.
Oh, I'm
so
staggered.
Everybody from all the pharmaceutical companies, everybody who's at universities or small biotech companies, everybody's there.
And everyone is searching for something, and that's all you have to do. Isn't it amazing how much is being poured into this? And
well, you know that last year alone, the direct and indirect costs of Alzheimer's was $220 billion.
I didn't know that.
And so by 2025, we're going to have to spend up to 25% of the total Medicare Medicaid budget looking after people with Alzheimer's. It's going to bankrupt us both emotionally and monetarily. So we're desperately trying to come up with something that even could slow it down for a few years, which would make a huge dent. If we could slow it down for 3 years, it'd be a major milestone.
Yes, that's what it said in this release that I was just reading, that just slowing it down. So, well, it's interesting to work in a field like this where every day, I guess you wonder if this is the day that something's going to happen because, well, just think about polio. Think about some of the things that they have found, whether it was the AIDS vaccine. I mean, there are things that can happen. It's just somehow this is so complex. Is it because of the brain?
It's complex because everything we call Alzheimer's is not the same thing. It's a syndrome. So people who get Alzheimer's early in life, before age 60, early onset Alzheimer's, is really a different disease than people who get it when they're 80.
Oh, wow.
And there are underlying genetics that are different for each group. And there's also a syndrome called LATE, L-A-T-E, which means there's a different protein, and that causes the disease. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like Alzheimer's. You can't tell the difference until the person passes and you look at the brain and there's no amyloid or tau. There's just this other protein. So we're pretty good at making an accurate diagnosis. That's been a huge change without having to get a biopsy. We can look at spinal fluid and use these tagging agents to glom onto amyloid or tau, and it lights up like light bulbs, and we can say that people have a diagnosis. But I think, let me just get rid of that. But we haven't come up with really anything that really works.
But it sounds like you have come up with a lot of things, even though it isn't the solution. Look at all the things that you've been talking about, slowing it down or different kinds of elements.
I'll tell you, the holy grail would be prevention. So we're doing prevention trials. So when people don't have any symptoms, but they have genes that put them at risk or family history, we can actually look to see if they have amyloid accumulating in the brain, like 10 to 15 years beforehand. And the idea is we would treat them, and they'll never know what they missed. So we don't have a cure to take people who have the disease and take them back to how they were 2 or 3 years before that. That isn't really kind of in our wheelhouse at this point. But if we could identify people at high risk and treat them before they have symptoms, then they never know what they miss. That would be where, of the prevention is huge. And we're doing prevention trials now.
Is the T2 Protect AD a prevention?
It's really to modify the disease, to slow it down. These people already have the disease. The prevention trials are you don't have symptoms yet.
I see.
But you're deemed at risk. And
you
we
have
would
the history
intervene before you have symptoms.
Yes, the history. Well, Dr. Brody, I know you have another very big appointment, and everyone wants to interview you, and I appreciate so much that you took the time. Brain Matters Research, you can call their office at 561-381-9060, and you can visit T2 Protect AD. Is that right?
That's right.
Thank you so much for being with us, and I'd love to stay in touch with you. You're just a wonderful person to do this, really. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Bye now.
Goodbye.